Welcome to 2016 Pre-Austral Just Test. The motion is, this House believes that prominent civil society activists should choose not to run for public office. And I would like to call upon first affirmative. Okay.
As a prominent civil society activist who strive to achieve the social justice and sacrifice themselves to influence the public, we think they should be in the condition where they can maximize their influence within the society and create a narrative proud and clear. Therefore, we say, as an autonomous choice of the prominent civil society activist who's supposed to be a leader, who is a charismatic, we think that they should rather take a peripheral role outside the political sphere and do not enter the public office. We think in order to achieve the goal as an activist, we think they should rather choose not to be in a public office in order to achieve their goal. Especially considering the fact that they are a charismatic, prominent leader, we think there's no necessity of those people, of charismatic people, actually entering into the political sphere, because we think this is going to, one, dilute the momentum of the public sphere, and also to make it impossible for them to convey the message within the society. Based on that, I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, about how those kind of prominent activists fail if they enter the political sphere, and secondly, about what kind of goal we actually achieve at the end of the day when they don't enter the public sphere and actually have their own settled organization that is quite independent to the political sphere. We think all those kind of things, organizations outside the political sphere are still capable to influence the people through lobbying, through being hired as an advisor or whatnot. So what we support, we're talking about any form of society where influential activist has a choice of either running as a public officer or staying in the organization to run their own social activity. We think this is fundamentally a trade-off of running as a public office or staying in their organization, because at the time you enter, you can no longer uniquely focus on the activists of like human rights or the environment, but you rather have to concentrate on other issues like economy, diplomacy, or whatnot. We think this is a trade-off that you have to stay or not. And we're talking about cases like human rights, like minority protection, environmentalists. All those kind of targets are encompassed within the idea of prominent social activists. And we also say that at the time when you enter the political sphere, we think this is going to let you lose the concentration and the support of actually striving the goal, which eventually leads to lose the momentum of yourself as a social activist as well. So what we prefer as the world is a paradigm where prominent leaders stay within the organization and actually influence the people within their organization and also people within the society. We think this is also better as well. And we think that all those kind of organization and people will still have the bargaining power and the official support. They can also officially support the politicians or can be hired as advisors, and all those kind of influence will still exist on our side of the house. So what they have to prove on their side of the house is a reason of why prominent leader who has charismatic influence have to uniquely enter to the world of politics in order to achieve their goal. We think this is the thing that they uniquely have to prove at the end of the day. So based on that first constructive, how do activists fail when they enter the world of political sphere? So ladies and gentlemen, we're standing on a premise that social activists are working on those kind of minor issues or the issues that are yet to be really focused by the society. We're talking about like environmental water, which are not really seriously treated by the states, or human rights protection, which is yet to achieve people's attention fully within the society. And at the end of the day, we think that those kind of activists, because the case can be minor, because the case is not fully focused by the society, they have to concentrate on their own issues in order to maximize their efficiency to influence the society. We think they have to concentrate and address the problem and cause a strong campaign rather than concentrating on diverse issues within the political sphere. So what happens if those kind of prominent actors enters within the world of become the politicians and run as a public officer? Firstly, we say that if those kind of become politicians, and they're probably going to be supported by the party in order to achieve their goal, and they're probably going to opt into the political sphere and have a contact with other politicians, and that's what those kind of people will operate. So we think that it's going to be we think that at the end of the day, when they enter and become politicians, well, they have to treat on something else, right? They have to also consider on economic factors, diplomatic factors, and all those kind of all those kind of matters are also going to be your burden as a politicians. And at the day, we think this is also going to make those people incapable to uniquely focus on the minor issues that eventually they wanted to focus initially. So we think that there are three problems that arises as well. Firstly, we say that we don't think that those people who enter the political sphere are really capable of being a good politician as well. Because yes, they are charismatic, they have rhetoric to influence the people, but they're uniquely focusing on the issues that they work usually do. Right? If at the time when you're a prominent environmentalist, yes, you do have a knowledge on environmentalists, but it doesn't mean you are really capable of focusing on many other issues as well. Which also leads to say that those people who actually enter the political sphere are not really interested or don't have really strong incentives to tackle on all other issues that you actually have to do as a politician, right? We think this is really harmful in terms of criteria of being a politician as well. And secondly, we say that those kind of activists will now need to compromise with our politicians. Because imagine you're a prominent environmental activist who's really eager to protect the tropical forest or whatnot. But now, at the time when you become the politicians, you're going to be the target of lobbying. We'll probably have other like polluting companies and other third parties saying that you have to dilute your own thesis, or saying that you have to compromise with your own idea. And at the time when those kind of external factors exist, other politicians within the party will also say that probably you have to compromise for a better benefit of the political party. And at the end of the day, we think this is really going to be harmful in two ways. Firstly, what happens if those kind of politicians actually follow the narrative of other politicians? And we think this is going to be a betrayal of your own natural incentive to work as a people. We think the supporters and all the fundings will probably be reduced, and you lose the entire momentum as a social activist. And at the time when you don't follow those kind of narrative, and we think that's also going to be the time when other politicians are not going to be supporting you, all those kind of authoritarian politicians who has been influential in a long time will probably think that you're not really capable to be the politician. So in both ways, if you follow those kind of narrative, if you don't follow those kind of narrative, you lose the power as an activist, and you lose the power of achieving a goal as well. And thirdly, the third question is, can those people really express their own idea? Because at the time when you enter the political party, your idea is not your own idea, but your own idea is rather delegated by the entire political party. Which also leads to say that you cannot really say anything you want, but you have to be the messenger of the political party. Which also, so at the end of the day, we think it's going to be extremely harmful for those people to actually say their own idea of how we want to protect the environment, how we want to protect the minorities' rights, because now those kind of messages will probably be diluted by the external factors like lobbying as well. So in comparison, what we actually support, we think it's rather better for those kind of prominent, charismatic activists to stay in their own organization, because now still they're influential through the factors like lobbying, through the factors like being hired and advisors. We think all those kind of methods are actually good enough in order to influence the political sphere and also the people within the society. At the time when charismatic leader enters, we think this is going to lose the momentum, because now those kind of leaders will not be capable to address the unique interests of what those people actually have. So in those kind of cases, we think that there's no uniqueness of having those people within the political sphere, because and we think our side is comparatively better for those people, for those organizations to insist on their original idea consistently, proud and clear. For those reasons, we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. And nextly, call up on the first negative.
Kotawa tells us that his goal is to make sure that these prominent activists get the maximum influence possible on society. And then immediately after, he tells you that therefore, these activists should play a peripheral role. We're not quite sure on opposition side what they stand for. Do they want these activists to have a maximum central role to politics, or do they want these people to remain on the periphery as they are? He tells you mostly that these politicians will bully these activists, and these activists don't make good politicians. That's pretty much the only point he had, right? which is great. It clashes directly with my point. I'm going to give you 3 things today. 1, why politicians are by nature activists to begin with, and why particularly prominent activists make good politicians. Secondly, why this movement particularly needs prominent activists in order to move their movement forwards. And 3, why public office is exactly the place that they have to do it. Now, Kotaro told you, okay, they're going to have to compromise, and they'll be seen as betraying their movements. See, here's the thing about prominent activists, is that because they hold such prominent roles within their civil society to begin with, they therefore necessarily owe a pledge of allegiance to these civil groups. That is a thing that makes them prominent to begin with. Once they lose that, that means that they're no longer prominent in that society, in that civil society, right? Which means that even if they're in office, they have a heavy incentive to remain true to those ideals, even if there are other pressures. Because fortunately, Mr. Speaker, we do not live in a society where other politicians get to elect other politicians. These politicians, these prominent activists, are voted into public office particularly because the people believe that they will represent their will. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, they say that, well, once they enter into the realm of politics, then they can't focus on the specific issues that they have. We think that this is not true. There's no evidence to suggest that Bernie Sanders in Senate for 20 years, he's still true to the message that he had on the very first day. Poverty, income inequality. These are the things that activists can bring. There's no such evidence that that would happen on our side of the House. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we think it's great that people diversify their issues because we think that cross-platform, we think that cross-issue policies are something that can allow other people, other sectors, other parts of civil society to come in and also attach on their ideas to your society, garnering wider support and wider recognition for that. We think that that's great. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we think that ultimately politicians are essentially activists by nature. We tell you that, in essence, politicians are compelled to run for office by their deep conviction for the cause that they believe in to begin with. If you don't believe in a cause, if you don't believe that what you're doing is making your country better, we on our side of the House believe that you have no business running for public office to begin with. We think that these politicians are proven advocates for their civil societies. But let's see what happens on their side of the House when you have unproven people, when you have people who have no kind of allegiance to any cause whatsoever, right? When they're unproven in their civil societies, people aren't inspired to vote for them. That's why we have low voter turnouts to begin with. That's because people don't think that the politicians, the people that are running for office, represent their will. Only prominent civil activists can do such a thing. But furthermore, they warned you about, flip-flopping and betraying their party and things like this. I already told you that it's more likely for them to remain true to their cause because they want to get re-elected by the same kind of electorate. But furthermore, people who are unproven, people who have not been shown to inspire the people, are much more likely to be susceptible to shifting allegiances. Because to begin with, they had no allegiance to a particular civil society in the first place. My second point, why the movement particularly needs these prominent civil activists. We think on our side of the House that we recognize every single movement, every single society is diverse. Not every single member believes in the same thing. That's why the rebel forces in Syria have such a difficult time, because they are fractured, they're splintered, and they have no leader. It's the same thing in civil society. When you are a mess, when you have no clear leader, then your society is likely to fracture, to disappear. That's why these civil society activists who are prominent can serve as a charismatic role model, can serve as a leader to bridge the kinds of differences and bring the people to similarity. And we think that these particular people are particularly important to the civil society and civil activist movement, because they are able to lead the civil society into a unified future that everybody can center around. So even if that particular policy that he may want to push, or the particular agenda he may want to push, might not be agreed by everyone on a large scale, at least everybody can rally under this person and say, yes, we believe in him, and give that person power to push their bills, to push their policies through into Congress or to vote for similar people that believe in similar things. But most of all, Mr. Speaker, public office is exactly the place that these prominent activists need to be in. Because ultimately, this debate is about whether we should just have civil activists say things that they like, say things that they want, but never be able to do anything. Kotaro told you that, well, they can still be lobbyists, they can still be advisors to politicians. See, the difference between actually being a politician yourself and being an advisor to a politician is that when you're a politician, you can actually do things. You don't have to listen to anyone. You can listen to some advice of other people, of other lobbyists, but you can reject that advice. When you're just a lobbyist, when you're just an advisor, that means people can reject your advice. People can reject what you want to say. We think that it's much better for them to be in the positions of power, to be able to do things, to be able to act on their society to begin with. Because, Mr. Speaker, these prominent civil society activists are the only chance at enfranchisement for the people within these civil movements. We think that people in public office enables you to do a wide range of things. They're able to propose laws. They're able to vote for bills. They're able to serve as the representative of the civil society within Congress, within the whatever parliament that you have. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, they are put in positions in which they're actually able to enact things that are important to these civil movements. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, you must evaluate on which side of the house brings you more benefits for these civil movements to begin with. On our side of the house, we bring you diversity, because these people are able to act on specific things that are important to specific areas on civil society, and they also act as unifying causes for these people. And on their side of the house, they have, advisors to politicians, I guess. I mean, these politicians still have the possibility to remove that voice, to remove that say. There's no evidence that on their side of the house, civil society movements will actually benefit whatsoever. We're extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech. And next we call on the second affirmative.
Yeah, I'm going to compare what they can do outside and inside.
That's one clash.
Yeah, that's one clash, the last clash, but before that, I'm going to talk about whether or not they will really change when things get inside. Are these two enough?
Well, team opposition doesn't really actually tell us once again. It's why these leaders of a movement have to be in office. It can be some other capable individual in politics that should be in the office, and they did not tell us Aung San Suu Kyi specifically that has to be in office. She can be out in society saying things freely, not with the restraints of political negotiation in the dirty ways of politics, or doesn't have to be catering to everyone because he or she has to gather votes. That sort of restraint would diminish her or his ability to stand firm for a specific issue and challenge people and ignite social discourse. And that's why the capability to ignite discourse and be the most controversial actor, the social movement, is diminished when you have the most influential actors in office. And I'm going to talk about two things. One, I'm going to talk about the legislative change which these prominent activists can have in office, which is their argument. Second, I'm going to talk about the role of social movements that they didn't really elaborate on, and the particular contributions that these prominent activists can have. All rebuttals were integrated. So, side negative speaks of that how the capability of being an activist and politicians are the same. They didn't really have much of an explanation other than that example of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has been in 20 years of parliament. That means that his skills and know-how are accumulated on how he has been able to negotiate and stand firm in the parliament. However, when talking about prominent social activists, we're talking about his recognition and his skill being accumulated on being in the society and actively claiming for his agenda, and not necessarily about compromise, but at least being a member of a political party. There are numerous distinctions that we have to note. Firstly, that these charismatic individuals in social movement are often just gathering certain specific issues, and often the top leader, and often just focusing on one agenda. That means that this individual specifically doesn't have so much skill in compromising and negotiating on specific issues. He is a sort of actor that has to stand firm and thinks that he has to stand firm and push for a specific agenda. That's why individuals like Aung San Suu Kyi, after he went into the government government of Myanmar often even said that I am the government and wasn't really negotiable with other actors and really not in harmony. And often when these prominent actors go into office, they are not really the most appealing actors of politicians who also are strong actors and would want to have trust in this actor and would negotiate. That means that other actors would not have an incentive to negotiate with this prominent actor, but further their capability to make concessions in that negotiation is simply diminished, while these actors as a politician simply isn't proven. At least then, but we can see that having movement within political parties are also important. That's why we suggest that other members who, obviously if there's numerous members in the organization, would have negotiable actors, that these actors should be in the political office. They're not told why this most prominent actor has to be in the office, and why I think that there's a mechanism that they want to achieve will be proved, it will be non-exclusive. And why rather when you have these individuals in office, that's where you have counterproductivity. Second, they talk about wide media recognition and the voting power. What we tell you is that once again, they never told us why these individuals have to be in office. That they only thing they have to do is campaign firmly and have media recognition out in society. They can advocate for that specific issue. They can say that vote for us, vote for this politician, and you can achieve that change. And it doesn't have to be that this specific individual like Aung San Suu Kyi running for office. That's why we never understood the mechanisms of them advocating for the change or whatever voting incentive on this other house. It's rather that you lose the capability for that recognition to happen. Because the recognition is often based on the momentum of the specific issue or the anger out of people on specific issues. And the anger is built on the firmness of these people standing, the charisma of the people standing, which is often built on the capability of these people to freely speak on a specific issue that they firmly believe in. When you have these people in office, they're restrained by other party members to say not really controversial things. That because he or she's a politician, they have to gather votes. That means that they can't say controversial things. They have to appeal to the majority. They can't question and challenge certain people for being problematic and being ignorant of specific issues. However, social movement challenge the majority, challenge people for being ignorant and unrecognizing of specific issues. That sort of venomous discourse when they're being a politician is simply impossible, and why we think their capability to create change, create movement is diminished, and why as the role of a prominent social activist, they simply cannot do that when in office. Then the issue was that so if they're outside, they will be rejected and things won't change or something like that. We tell you it's once again, it's the internal change in political office is a mutually exclusive, because you would have this other actor like a number two or sort of the person that's good at readjustment will be in there, which its leader can influence indirectly or behind and can have the negotiations happening. But further, we think that generally social movements were happening not from the office, but happening from grassroots change. That's why we saw the black movement, that's why we saw the LGBT movement, when the strong momentum created by civil movements that accumulated and pressured politicians and pressured society to have a majority movement and have that change. That ignition of that discourse, the anger and identification of this issue was what was necessary and what social activists have to identify on. So even if we can see that outcomes might be on this other house, the roles that social activists take are different. That political organization might have a role in having that change, but social movements have a particular role in igniting that discourse and having a controversial say. That ignition, the first step, is something you deprive because these organizations or activists are unique, often the only actor to have that ignition, which is partly my second argument is about. And we need to understand that these social movements goal is to achieve change, but the focus and the necessity of these organizations are placed on the ignition of the social discourse. And prominent leaders are necessary to attract people and may say the most controversial thing to make that discourse happen. Simply as they conceded that they will be able to most convey the messages and issues in the most impactful way, and the media has an incentive to focus on these people, obviously because they're the prominent leader. And we have to recognize that there are numerous social issues unrecognized even now, that there are numerous minorities or minority existent, or simply that there are new emerging issues like rape culture emerged later in the feminist movement, or the diversification of feminism sort of emerged later, or the issue of this LGBT with the toilets or transgender emerged very recently. There are new issues that emerge that these social activists have to identify and keep on challenging the society and have to stand always as a social movement outside of the public office. And often because the establishment and the media, specific actors in the media have an incentive to crowd out this and silence that movement. The most influential actors always have to send a message to society so that they're able to counter that influence, or hiding out that issue and counter that and have a change happening. We have to have the maximum capacity to influence society and have a change in any way. And once again, because when these particular only actors who have the capability to change the media and change society, when in office, are not able to say the most challenging thing, they are not able to say the most controversial things, your capacity as an organization to have any change is diminished. That is particularly problematic because these organizations aren't really the most financially funded or influential actors that can counter the establishment of strong actors. That means that when these people, it's easy for like this majority society or other actors to just ignore them even if they're shouting out. The only capability of these organizations is to challenge the people, make people think, make people change and stand up. And it's not about these people having the strong political pressure to change other actors. It's that ignition that these organizations have an only capability in establishing. Or I think that when the only actors that is capable of making that ignition, being unable to participate in that opportunity for change, you lose any change that you have possible where the social movement have an importance on. So the conclusion is simple. Political organizations have a role in changing, starting that change, where these prominent actors have particular capability in. We understand that political parties have another role, but something these prominent leaders doesn't have to do, but also this is no different debate from social activists.
Thank you for the speech. And next they talk on the second derivative. Go ahead.
No. I need timing though. Thanks. Four reasons why I believe we took this debate. First, they never engage why these people have to be in office. We think that Aung San Suu Kyi's success was mostly in office because she was able to push, as a member of the parliament, to push the Myanmarese government, the Myanmarese military, to negotiate to lift the sanction on Myanmarese people with the USA. That prominently improved the US economy. That is something that you cannot do as an activist. Second, specific convictions of politicians, like why we think that our vision of politician is better than theirs. Because first of all, they believe, like we tell you that these politicians are sincere, but even if they're not, they have strong incentive because their very first principle of getting in office, their very case for them being a member of the parliament is that they defend this issue with their hearts and mind, with their very strong conviction. If they go back on that, then their career is over because there's no reason to believe in them as a person anymore. There's no reason to vote for them anymore. On their side, they simply say that when these people go into the office, they'll somehow be corrupt, they'll somehow have to compromise. Now third, they believe that compromise is inherently evil in and of itself. We do not believe that that's the case. First of all, we don't believe that compromise will somehow happen in the first place because we see people like Bernie Sanders and even disgusting guys like Donald Trump arguing against his own party, arguing against the establishment. But second of all, even if compromise happened, it means that, for example, Aung San Suu Kyi compromised perhaps by not saving the Rohingyas in the massacre in Myanmar, but she was able to push the military to lift the ban, push the military to negotiate with the US, which ended up in the US lifting the sanction. But we don't think that's compromise in the first place because Aung San Suu Kyi never pushed for defend the Rohingya thing. Now lastly, the fourth thing. On that side of the house, there is no track record. There's no track record of the politicians who come up and become these politicians in the first place. What does that mean? That means they create a special class of people. Only the rich will have enough connections, will have enough money to lobby, to buy the election, to buy the advertising machine, to buy the media, so they look like someone trustworthy, right? So they create on that paradigm, the politicians only come from the rich people, only come from a class that's separate from the issue at hand, from the issue such as Bernie Sanders pushing for increased minimum wage, for Bernie Sanders pushing for a progressive tax on the rich. That's why the rich or these separate castes cannot make this change happen. A few arguments. First, on why election itself is exposure on the national platform and not simply a small niche platform under that paradigm. Second, why election, what is this? Can't read my note. Why election won't change anything. Lastly, the negotiation, if I have time, I'll go on about the negotiation rule. First of all, election is inherently a voicing platform. Even if Bernie Sanders didn't get elected, he pushed for the progressive agenda to now be on national agenda. He pushed for the word social democrats, socialist democrat to be accepted in America, a country where inherently there is a strong discrimination against the word socialist. Right? Because, why is that? Because in election time there's speeches, there's coverage of the speeches, there's analysis of the speeches that is done on the press. And let's look at normally we tend to forget about these things because it doesn't really affect us directly, the majority of the people, right? But when the election happened, when these speeches are all the time in our newsfeed in Facebook, when it's on the national television all the time, we tend to get excited about it, we tend to read up on these things. When we have these conversations in daily life, we need to read up in order to argue with our friends, right? In order to argue with Chinny, I have to read up stuff, right? And because of these things, because when these people, when they run, they talk about these things. These information get to my daily life. I get to know more about progressive progressive agenda in America. I get to know about problem in America. This will never happen if activists like Bernie Sanders never run. He would just be talking in a small blind spot somewhere in Vermont and I won't even hear him, right? Now second argument about the idea of after election, why these politicians won't change, right? We think on our side of the house that most of these activists are sincere to begin with. What kind of man, push for something, select a job that doesn't really pay well in order to push for some social change. But even if that is not the case, right, it is better than the blind test of their side. Because when you say that activists should never become politicians, you only select politicians from the pool of the rich people, which I have touched upon already. Which I touched upon already. So at least we're doing better than them. But let's be a little bit more cynical, right? Let's say that these politicians somehow, these activists come politicians are somehow self-interested also. But when you ask for vote, you inherently go up there and debate against other people why you should be the one in office. In this debate, you flaunt your qualification. You talk about what you believe in, what you want to change in office. And when your first thing that you want to change in office, say for example for Bernie Sanders, is to tax the rich, the moment you stop taxing the rich, in that moment you no longer have the legitimacy to remain in office. You no longer have the legitimacy to become the politician that people voted for, right? That's why this is the distinction between activist come politician and normal politician. Because activist come politician will always have that thing as the first incentive. That is why, at any rate, we think that even in our worst case, we're doing better than them. Now, last argument on the negotiation room, right? Why you must, okay, so in politics, you have negotiation room before the bill was even passed. You try to get as much vote, for example, in America, you try to get as much vote for your own bill as possible before you even propose it in the Congress. And this is something that you must do, right? So when you negotiate, sometimes you must negotiate with your party, or I give you this, you give me that. The problem becomes that when you are an activist, you can never enter the negotiation room. You can never know what goes on in that black box.
Can I
So,
say this one person?
and this is where
It's the same.
And this is where Chinese real power come in. Because when you are a politician, you can always say that you must give me this issue that is so important to me as an activist come politician, otherwise I won't give you some other issue. That is something that can never be achieved under that paradigm. That's something that can never be achieved outside office. In that paradigm, you won't even know that these backroom dealings are happening in the first place, right? So that means you are able to push both your party and the opposite bench using real power in politics to push for taxing the rich, to push for environmental issue, which can sometimes be so obscure that the politicians at the top will never represent it wholeheartedly as you did. For all these reasons, proud to oppose.
Thank you for the speech. And nextly, call up on the third affirmative.
I don't know if I can speak.
You can.
Like these materials. After the entire speech of the opposition side, at last we couldn't actually see why this prominent activist of the leader of them is necessary inside the political sphere. We think all of the benefits that was coming from the opposition side can be achieved without these leaders inside the political office. So I'm gonna talk about two things as the whip speaker. So first of all, we're gonna talk about the uniqueness of these leaders and if are they really necessary inside the political sphere. And second of all, about the issues of compromisations. Can they still have their stance after they enter the political sphere? But before that, one clarification. Well, the previous speaker has been taking a really long time talking about Bernie Sanders. But the clarification from our side is that Bernie Sanders is not in like activist and leader in the first place. They're in the only politics. Like the activists, we think is like people having their own like groups, having like the leaders of feminist movements, like leaders of LGBT movements, economic environmental groups, that kind of like leaders. And we think that Bernie Sanders is only a politician, and it's different from these issues. And therefore, we don't think that like people like Bernie Sanders, we're happy for those people to be inside the political sphere. So like a lot of the issues of their side is not really necessary in this debate. So on to my arguments. First of all, about the uniqueness of the politicians. What they said is that first of all, they said that the political leaders cannot recognize what kind of negotiations is going inside the political sphere. First of all, we have this idea of transparency, like what kind of negotiations occurring inside the political office, what kind of like policies the politicians delivers. It's all like shown to the citizens, having like TVs, having like shown what kind of discourse they're having, that kind of stuff. But second of all, these kind of leaders are like taking a really long time concentrating on their issues. So they have an active incentive to go inside these political sphere, ask what kind of policies they're trying to use, or like what kind of negotiations are occurring, doing lobbies, that kind of stuff, actively gathering information. So the lack of information in these lobbies, in these leaders, is not really a huge problem. But then they said that well, election is a place of voicing platforms, and leader is necessary. Well, first of all, they already have a platform to voice out. They have their own groups. A lot of groups doing like parades or doing like advertisements, calling to the citizens, saying that we have these kind of stance using the medias. Like I am a leader of these groups. I have these kind of ideas. That kind of like voicing out, it can already be occurred uniquely because these kind of people are prominent leaders. A lot of the people have an incentive to know what kind of idea these people have, and therefore they already can voice out even if without the elections. But then they said that well, people need to know information. Like Fudge needs to know information by these leaders being inside the political sphere. But why does it have to be the leaders uniquely to know the information? We think like a lot of the we're happy for a lot of the other like social activists inside the same group, like going to the political sphere is okay. Those kind of people give the same information, such as the same information like as the leaders, and we think that kind of information, the quality of the information is same, and we think it is already enough. Maybe they're talking about people not recognizing that these people, they don't have more attention than the leaders. We think that we think that those people can still gain attention. Those can gain attention, which attentions. They talked about like these social changes and how like the uniqueness of this is that people can do whatever they want to do. People can, those leaders can propose laws, that kind of stuff. Again, it doesn't have to be the leaders to propose these laws and create the discourse inside the parliaments and try to move towards social change. I think a lot of people inside these groups are going inside the politics, not the leaders, but a lot of the other members will go inside the political sphere. And also, these leaders are going to support the members of their own groups. Going to the Larry, having an election with like the leaders standing next to you, like saying, "I'm gonna officially support these kind of people." Then like people like Fudge will still can recognize that, well, this is the people that I should be voting for because I'm supporting for these leaders. But then the leader is supporting these people, so I should support these people. I'm gonna listen to what these people says. I'm gonna receive information from this. The problems that they have mentioned can be already achieved inside our paradigm, but we think that social change can be better achieved in our paradigm. Like if only one leader is being inside the parliament is not enough to create the social changes. A lot of the people having the same idea inside is uniquely important. Is uniquely important when you want to change, when you want to pass laws, when you want to change the situations. But then we think it is better when the leaders are outside the political sphere. When they're outside the political sphere, only the members are inside the political sphere. Like because then the leaders can concentrate more on trying how to take their own people, take the members inside their members, and then show what kind of like decision those people should make when they have like when they have a hard time. These leaders uniquely should only concentrate on their own issues, not on the other issues itself. But this leads on to my second point, which is like about the difference between politicians and these leaders, because the politicians cannot only like concentrate on solving one issues at all. They have to concentrate on maximizing the benefits of the whole society, which is different from the leader who is only changing one issue of the social changes. This is when compromisation occurs, because what my partner has already mentioned is that the uniqueness of these leaders is that they're constantly challenging to the society, giving more controversial issues to try to progress the society. What this means is that not all of the people inside the society doesn't always support you. If the feminists, for the, like really radical feminist movements leaders, that kind of people makes huge like controversy inside the society. Not a lot of people support you. And this time, what Shinny has said about, well, people naturally vote you because they're like because they are like prominent as leaders is not really true, because even if they are prominent, sometimes only the minority of the people supports these kind of issues. In this situation, we think that those kind of people's ideas conflicts to the like society, conflicts to what the society wants to demand, and often cases. In these situations, we think that if they have to be a politician who has to concentrate on maximizing the social benefits, they have to compromise to a certain extent, trying to change their radical stance into a more moderate stance. We think that this is crucially harmful for these leaders who has to like always challenge the society. They cannot challenge anymore, because if they're politicians, they want to gain votes from the people. But if they want to gain votes, their radical stance, their challenging stance you cannot gain votes by taking that kind of challenging stance. And therefore, like being the leader, being the politician, is extremely harmful, because they cannot take take their stance that they wanted to take, and therefore we propose.
Thank you for the speech. And next they call on the third negative.
역시 쓰리스마.
So the government side has expressed many concerns about how these people will change and be conciliated by the other politicians and political pressure once they go into office. However, they never explained, like, it's their burden to show us why they should not run for office, right? When, like, these prominent activists are the only ones who have enough trust and popularity and the support from these civil activists and civil rights movements, and when these movements do have something to push for that they could not yet gain outside the office, then we believe that these people being politicians is the only way to push for further change for these civil rights movements. So as the opposition whip, I'm going to summarize this debate by 2 clash points. First of all, like, would these people really change, and would change once they go into office, or would they be able to push for their previous causes? And secondly, outside and inside office, which paradigm can they influence more for their civil active movements? But first of all, let me revert to the previous speaker, or like the government side. So first of all, they attacked our example about Bernie Sanders. However, Bernie Sanders is an activist, right? He was a famous anti-war and anti-trust activist in the 1960s when he was in university, right? And also, they attacked our point about information. However, these prominent activists are the ones who can give trustworthy information for the people, because like these people are trusted by the supporters, and they are the only ones who can like give these information in order to unify people, because these people agree with what they say, right? They're already a symbol of that movement. That's why they have enough power to unify people's opinions, and like it'll be better for the movement, right? And also, like, they gave no analysis of our point that politicians by definition are already people who are pushing for their own agenda. They are activists in the first place, right? They had to answer that point. So moving on to my clashes, what will happen if these people go into office? So when we talk about this point, we have to also remember like the characterization of these people, right? Whether or not they will be conciliated. However, we think it's not likely because of 3 analyses. First of all, naturally, they have strong passion to push for their cause. That's why they became prominent activists in the first place. That's why they devote many years into promoting this cause, into unifying these people, and look for many people who can support his point about the cause that he stands for, right? And second, that's why he will not like betray these people. And secondly, they have the career that they have built up in the many decades. That's why these people have both the responsibility and the pride for what they have achieved in all those years. That's why it's not likely that once these people go into office, they're going to suddenly change their stance for life, and then they're going to betray these people. And thirdly, because these people are, if they run for office, they are politicians, right? They have to get re-elected in order to push for their cause. So that is why they will try very hard to not lose the trust that these supporters have for him, because there are the voting grounds that that he has, and if he loses their trust, he's not going to be re-elected, right? So these people have charisma, and they're famous, and they have many followers. So that's the characteristics. And they talked about like these people will not be capable politicians because they do not have negotiating skills. They're stubborn people who only push for their causes. But that's not true, right? Because these people have a career have an achievement of like unifying already the various fractions inside the movement. Our LO already talked about that. They were able to bring together the many types of opinions that exist inside the movement, and then they're also, so that's why they have the power to negotiate and persuade people. But what's even better is that they are better negotiators than most people, right? That is how they have persuaded many people to gather funds for the movement, and also like even if they are gather funds for the movement, and even if these people, what they're fighting for is relatively disenfranchised idea in the society in the first place, right? And also they talked about these people will be really co-opted by political sphere and would not be able to make radical comments, but that's not true, because these people have the support from their supporters, so that is why they're in the diet in the first place. So there will be just like other politicians. If we follow be able to speak for what they stand for because all of them will be neutralized by other politicians' pressure. But that's not what's happening, right? For example, Koizumi, he was a member of the Jiminto LDP. However, like he was against LDP, but then he used that power as a politician in LDP in order to push for his economic policies, such as the privatizing of JP Post, right? So that is the mechanism how these people, even if they are like in the political sphere, they can still push for what they believe in. That's because they want to get reelected again, right? And also like yeah, and even if we concede to their claim that these politicians will compromise to some extent, but there are still unique benefits that's remaining on our side, which is these people have unique benefits that they receive from being inside the office, and at least because change from the status quo, change from what they have already achieved will still occur in our paradigm. That's what I'm going to talk about next. So I'm going to compare what these people can do outside and inside the office. Well, for example, if they're outside, all they can do are public speeches and campaigns and demonstrations at best, right? So these are mere expressions of what they believe in, and they cannot force other people to comply with what they say, right? For example, Aung San Suu Kyi, when she was outside the office, she did not have real power. All she could get was sympathy. That's why she was locked up for many years, right? So they can only wait for sympathy, and that's, first of all, it's not really effective because the civil rights is relatively already disenfranchised in that specific country. So majority of people don't sympathize with what they're saying in the first place, and even if they could voice out in their own community, it's only going to be their own Facebook page, right? The people who are not interested in their cause will not even go visit that Facebook page. However, if these people are in office, they can have exposure on the national television, like imagine how big a difference that is, right? And even if they could get international sympathy, it cannot really change directly the policies and laws in that specific country, and even if it could, it takes time, right? And even if some change could occur, those changes are already occurring in the status quo, and what we are standing for are the further changes that is not going to be achieved if they are outside the parliament. And what will happen if they get inside? Like, these people could pass laws and bills and they can be representative. Why this is good is that, first of all, they can have coercive power. Gravity and the scope of influence is totally different. If they're outside, then just like proposing a policy to be discussed in the Diet is a long fight, right? However, if they're inside, if they are a politician, once they propose, then it will actually be discussed by many politicians, and that will bring many public attention to that issue that these people did not really pay attention to in the previously. And also, they have the power to actively force people and influence other people, because like even if they could not pass the policies, the policy that they're discussing in the Diet, they can change the details of how these policy is going to be enacted. For example, they can include the LGBT people in the marriage policy, they can include the poorer people in the welfare policy. So that's how they can make change more and more in only our paradigm. And even if like these people cannot do that, just by their existence itself is beneficial, because having a representative of that specific civil rights itself is going to be good, because other politicians, they all have other agendas and other goals, right? In order for them to achieve that kind of goals, these politicians are going to appeal to their activists, appeal to these activist politicians, because these activist politicians have a set of core fans or like core supporters that is already believing in what he says, and that is going to be very attractive when seen from other politicians. That's why even if negotiation politics occurs, that's still beneficial in our paradigm, because at least these people's opinions can be heard by other politicians, and that's how we can like push for what we stand for little by little, and that can only be achieved in our paradigm. So that's why we proudly oppose. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. And next we call on the reply speaker for the negative.
By the logic of government side, when you're a prominent representative of your civil society, then you should not run for public office. So if you're already a politician, and then you become a symbol, a prominent symbol of a civil society, by that logic, you should resign, and therefore just go into that civil society and work there and have no voice. We tell you, on our first point, that they have the burden to tell us why they should not run for civil society. We tell you that if Lyndon Baines Johnson, when he became the president, he was already a prominent leader in the movement against poverty, in the war against poverty. by his office as first Vice President, then President of the United States, he managed to reduce the poverty level of the United States by 20% through the project known as the Great Society. We tell you that if he had resigned, if he had stopped pursuing public office, none of this change would be possible because he would only be an advisor. He would only be the kind of talking heads that Kotaro wanted them to be. Instead of a maximum impact on their role, he would truly have been on the periphery. Second, they tell you that compromise is bad. They say, well, when they compromise, that dilutes their message. Well, let's take the comparative here, right? On our side of the house, we recognize that sometimes compromise is possible, sometimes it's not. But nonetheless, we enact some change. Some things are going to be better for the civil society. And we think that's okay, because at least these movements have a voice to be heard now in that parliament, in decision-making power. That means they are necessarily enfranchised into that decision-making process to begin with. And we think that furthermore, they then tell us that these politicians are going to change. We think not. We think that even if they change, this change will be so minimal. Because these politicians, to begin with, they derive their legitimacy from their position of prominence. And how did they get to that position of prominence? Because they were able to unify the civil societies. They're able to become the representative of that civil society. Which means that they therefore have a responsibility. There's a pressure of expectation exerted upon these prominent civil society activists. When they have that pressure, when they know that their primary supporter base is the people within that civil society itself, there is huge incentive, as second speaker told you, to follow and continue the path that they were on, that they gained prominence with to begin with. And then they say, well, we'll bring more changes with no analysis at all, right? They said that they'll have changes, but then these changes will occur because they're like advisors to politicians. We think that's bullshit. We think that essentially changes occur when you put these people in places of prominent position and prominent power. Unless they're in the Diet, how can they possibly hope to effectuate change? Maybe some kind of change might happen on their side of the house, but again, debate is a comparative. Will we have more change on their side of the house when they're simply advisors, or more change on our side of the house when they can actually vote for the changes, when they're actually the people that are doing the changes? And finally, they tell you that it's harmful for civil society. And we said, no, it's not. In fact, it empowers these civil societies. Because when people, as Third told you, when people see their prominent civil society activists in positions of power, they feel empowered, they feel enfranchised, because they feel and they see their symbol represented in that political voice. That's something that can't happen under their side of the house because those people remain sidelined. Which means that on our side of the house, when we can bring these small messages to a national front, when we can bring these messages to national television versus their platform, or specifically only to that civil society to begin with, we think that we can expand the message on our side of the house. We reach more people on our side of the house, and we effectuate more change on our side of the house.
Thank you for the speech. And lastly, call upon the Vice Speaker for the comment.
We think it's chronologically false when the side opposition say Aung San Suu Kyi had to be the politicians in order to democratize the country. Because the election didn't exist in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. Well, she was an activist. I don't know, she could have used a Facebook. She used all those kind of grassroots methods. And that was the initial momentum that actually caused the international attention to cause a sanction and take international community to take active steps. We don't think all those kind of analyses that they said was something that is really relevant in this debate. I'm going to talk about two clashes in this debate. Firstly, at the time when activists become politicians, are they actually capable to continue to insist on their original issue? And secondly, about is there a real uniqueness of prominent activists entering the political sphere? And what we're going to say is that all benefits are not mutually exclusive, and there are only harms of those people being hired as politicians at the end of the day. So firstly, what happens at the time when those people enter as politicians? Yeah, they said that politicians can still have a strong will as a prominent activist, but the only backing example was Bernie Sanders. was probably like, who was even suspicious to be the prominent activist. It was like 3 decades ago to begin with, right? We told you that relatively, and this is relatively an issue that is yet to be seriously treated. This is an issue that is yet to be strongly recognized by the majority, like an environment, like a majority, not something like value-added tax or social security or whatnot, right? So at the time when you become the politicians, what you tend to primarily sacrifice is those kind of minority issues, right? Because now you need to vote in order to get the attention by the majorities, and you're more likely to be influenced by the lobbying. You're more likely to be influenced and pressurized by those kind of authorities, and those are the unique issues that happens on their side of the house, right? So in terms of comparatively speaking, we say that those people that you lose the momentum as an activist, you dilute your message as an activist, and we think that's the harm that uniquely exists on their side of the house. The only response is that. The only response that this have is that, yeah, we have voting. But voting probably makes people to make attention, right? But the thing is, we still back those politicians up as an activist. We think all those kind of messages that activists make are still going to be apparent within the process of election at the end of the day. We don't think that those kind of election is something that is uniquely beneficial on their side of the house. So secondly, is there uniqueness of having prominent activists as to enter as a politician? Well, we told you that all those kind of methods, such as lobbying, like being hired as an advisor, or officially supporting politicians if they want Bernie Sanders, are also capable on our side of the house, right? They only said that it's not going to be working, without really showing why it's not going to work, right? If that is the case, if that doesn't work, then how does it work on their side of the house? Because if the political sphere is that conservative, that authoritarian, and there are also some dirty negotiations, then all this kind of thing will not work anyways, right? At the time when activists enter the political sphere, then those people will probably also going to be not influential at the end of the day. We think that this is going to be the factor that dilute the power of the activists at the end of the day, and all of those kind of harms are probably also going to happen anyways. That's why we told you that you don't uniquely need the leader to enter to the political sphere, right? And well, Bernie Sanders, you can officially support Bernie as a prominent activist. You can officially support Bernie Sanders, right? In fact, what made Bernie Sanders famous and influential was not only because of his unique capability, but also by the underlying grassroots activists, which actually ignited the attention and brought issue to the society as well. We think all those kind of activists are still influential within the society without really those people entering as a prominent leader to be the politicians as well. So the unique harm that exists on the side of opposition is that you have an inherent instability of diluting the message and losing the trust. And it's also doubtful, and they never responded, of the capability of actually dealing with the other problem, right? They said that, yeah, well, prominent activists are really good at uniting people. But yeah, you can probably unite people within the activity of uniquely environmental, uniquely human rights and whatnot, right? But it doesn't mean that you can actually make all of those people to collaborate and bring things to the issue and make good policies at the very end of the day. We think all those kind of things should be rather delegated on the politicians that activists are officially supporting to begin with. So for all those kind of harms that uniquely exist on their side, we think that in order to pursue the goal as a social movement, we are very proud to propose.